So, welcome all to the second of our Talking Cyber webinar series for 2026. I'm your host, Charlie Wood, Director of Contractor Solutions at Head Resourcing, a specialist technology, digital and transformation recruitment agency headquartered in Edinburgh. I'd also like to introduce Luke Bird, our guest speaker today, and the Information Security Manager at City Facilities Management. Luke will be speaking to us today about bridging security, IT and the business, how to align priorities, language and accountability across teams. Luke is an industry award winner with over 18 years of continuity, resilience and risk management experience covering both business and technology. His career spans over 12 years in financial services across 4 large banks covering first and second line risk roles, and he specialises in business continuity, incident management and technical and security risk. At City Facilities, Luke heads up a team that are responsible for information security, data protection, third-party security due diligence, and technology and security risk and control governance. Pleasure to hand you over to Luke.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. Hi, everyone. Well, I think Charlie's already done part of the introduction. My name is Luke Bird, and I work for City Facility Management Services. So obviously, we provide facilities management services and construction and building engineering services to an array of clients in the UK and abroad across a number of different sectors. I actually sit within the UK and Europe space, where I head up information security and technology risk. And as Charlie correctly alluded to, my team, I'm also responsible for data protection, technology control testing, and third-party due diligence as well. So it's quite a broad team with a lot of different stakeholders, engagements, and specialist tasks. Today's brief session is about bridging the gap between IT, security, and the business. It's an age-old problem across all types of organizations and sectors. And I'm sure, as we all know, it's not always easily achieved. I could be biased when I say this, but I feel the pain can be even more challenging when you work within the risk and control space, particularly within technology and security. We often have to uncover and discuss and analyze problems, and our work often has a perceptive often middle of sort of innovators and creators and money makers. Now, those are the types of people who typically see themselves as making the things that make them money, that give the budget to have you as in a job in the first place as a risk professional. But as a risk professional, obviously, many would see that differently and argue that without us, the business wouldn't be able to legitimately operate and to be able to produce the thing that made the money. So it very much depends on who you're talking to. And I guess that's really the point of my presentation today. Since there are many, many different departments across technology, security, and the business, and trying to get a single message to land doesn't always work. And I'm sure anyone listening to this can resonate with that. So I'm hoping to take no more than maybe 20 minutes of your time. And then, as Charlie says, we can follow up with some discussion or questions after. Okay, so what I've done to start with is present you with a typical problem statement, just something similar to things that I've encountered in my career over the years, which you may well have as also. Now, the statement itself is not the important thing to focus on firstly. What I'm trying to do with this slide is to illustrate a sort of non-exhaustive list of examples of just some of the departments that might be involved or informed, as in the types of people that may have some level of skin in the game as to the resolution. Now, in this example, you'll see that we've got unredacted data, whether it's PII data or not, we don't know, and it's sitting in a non-production environment with developers. And that is being actively used day to day for regression testing on a model calculation system that actually sits in the production environment, and that supports a critical business area. So, as you can see from the slide, I've given you a number of flavors of the types of stakeholders that could be involved. There's developers, testers, engineers, those who maintain the environments. I'm pretty sure data protection folks will have a view on this. And what about those who develop the models in the first place, or even the business users and the clients that rely on the model outputs? I mean, how many specialist areas are in place? You could come at this statement with a variety of perspectives, expectations, and different terminology. So I'm sure you'll agree there's quite a few. But this slide is hopefully to illustrate that. And I think the slide, it sums up a challenge, this sums up the challenge very well. When you're attempting to communicate internally, it can be so hard to develop a catch-all level style of content and tone that captures and satisfies everyone, especially when you're talking about technology and security risks. Discussions in IT or security risk can cover some very, very specialist domains in their own right. An IT professional such as myself could be faced with all sorts every day. We could be talking about encryption standards, network topography, firewall rules, open ports, end-of-life hardware, unsupported software, unpatched systems. All of these topics have specialists who have spent years developing their expertise and insight. And then on top of that, you often have the business who are completely unaware of the tech and the tech stack, but have a fundamental understanding of the commercials or the product on the front line, none of which the risk professional is often a master of on either side, which obviously then presents a challenge. Now, I'm not a comms expert, but I do have a few lived examples of successful and failed attempts at trying to nail down like the cleanest summary of a risk. And I wanted to spend the rest of my brief time today on this session to run through a recent example that was surprisingly effective. And to point out that really the thing I want to get across to you is that it's okay to step out of the standard approaches and being too formal about things, and maybe take a different approach, some light-hearted, fun perhaps. We're having to deal with what is often a difficult and regular challenge. But I thought that slide was a useful illustration of just some of the hats around the table that with a technology and security problem such as that, which is something that has and does come up with across organizations and sectors. Okay, so to set the scene, my objective for the approach that I took recently was I had to re-energize a multidisciplined audience about risk and control, which is not easily done. I need them to revisit some core concepts and get everyone on board with sharing their risks to me so that me and my team can help manage them. So I could go book smart and I could roll out all of the official terms, and I could hope, as the slide suggests, that someone was awake enough to have retained some of it. But let's be honest, there aren't many Hollywood feature-length movies about a risk manager. Although when I wrote that, I went to check because I did recall one, and Ben Stiller is a risk manager in Along Came Polly. So I'm gonna take that as a win. So if you ever have to have that conversation, remember that one. They do make movies about people like us. But nevertheless, it's an easy scenario to be very dull and to switch people off when talking about this particular topic. So with that in mind, I thought I'd have a bit of fun with some storytelling. If it fails, people move on. And if it lands, people will remember. I kind of had nothing to lose, really. And what says technology and security risk, I thought, than a castle, a dragon, and a king. I mean, in reality, probably quite a lot of things, to be honest, but that's what I decided to run with. So from here on in, what I'm going to do is deliver the same approach to yourselves to give you a flavor of how I delivered that. And my objective is the same. So there's this king, and he lives in a castle, and he's recently been contemplating the risk of a fire-breathing dragon. I mean, in my slide, I've tried to make him look like a data-eating fire-breathing dragon, but still a fire-breathing dragon nonetheless. So now, how do most people think about risk in human nature? Well, from my experience, the first thing we do at work and at home is we look around and we ask ourselves, has it happened before? And if it did, how bad was it? Has it happened to any other castles in the neighborhood? And if it did, what happened to them? How often does it happen? I mean, there's plenty of books and movies about dragons, so we all have a pretty good idea of how bad it could be. The king will have heard tales about the dragons as well, and just much like the rest of us, that he will have formed a view, and that's broadly how we start to arrive at the sort of risk conversations. What is the risk of something like that happening? But the king, he's not worried. It's like he has a few tricks up his sleeve. Now, first of all, he's got this watchtower around his castle. And in that watchtower, there's a rotation of soldiers who work 24/7. And what they do, as you'd expect, is they take a look out. And if they see anything, they ring a bell. And what that does is it gives them time to grab the weapons and get people to safety. And this is what we would call a detective control. It gives the castle, the king, the organization, an early heads up to allow them to make more decisions more quickly to hopefully reduce the scale of the impact. I suppose from a technology and security sort of examples to a detective control is your sort of your SOC alerts and your intrusion detection systems. Once something flags, if you get it early enough, you get to be able to make better decisions. Now, not only that, but the king, as well as his watchtower, he's got something else. The king was at a king's convention a few years back, and he made an impulse buy for this huge shield that is designed to protect the castle against this type of attack. Now, the shield would take the hit and avoid any or all impact of the dragon's wrath. So this is what we would call now as a preventative control. It's something that either avoids the occurrence completely or reduces the impact if it does. So for a preventive control in sort of today's technology terms, what would prevent it from occurring or reducing the impact? We'd have to think along the lines of network segmentation, multi-factor authentication, and of course, encryption. So detective and preventative controls. So having considered all of this, the king feels pretty confident about the risk of this dragon, and he thinks it's being well managed. However, the shield, it hasn't been out of the basement for years, and it's rusted a little bit. In fact, there's a small hole in it where some fire probably could get through. His watchtower isn't as robust as he thinks it is either. It turns out the guys in the watchtower, they sometimes fall asleep while they're in duty, so they're not actively monitoring. I mean, as for the shield, well, it's not being used for testing or real events, and it's locked away. So it's unlikely that anyone even knows that it's weakening. And no one's going to tell on the shift workers about them falling asleep in the watchtower. It's just for fear of getting caught, or perhaps they haven't been caught. It's just the king has no awareness of the flaws in his controls. Another interesting thing to consider is the fact that there's a whole bunch of other things that the king could consider investing in to protect himself that are arguably just as good as what he has, like maybe a drawbridge or some archers, perhaps. As far as the king knows and the way he's looking at it, he has two fully functioning, industry-leading controls that fully mitigate the risk of a dragon attack. So if he did know everything that I've just described to you, then surely he could sort it, couldn't he? Well, not necessarily. Thing is, the king's juggling all sorts of priorities, as you can imagine. He's only got so much time, so much money and attention to do these things. Got a lot on his plate. Plus, he's got things of his own agenda that he wants to do. I mean, he's currently toying up between deciding whether to invade the neighboring kingdom to expand his own, and or the alternative, whether to sort of renovate his banquet hall to impress and entertain new potential partnerships. He's got his own ideas. He wants to take the kingdom in his own direction. He can't do everything. He always needs to make a priority call because there's a lot to do and there's not enough time or money to do it, generally speaking. So, how does the king make a priority call with all that in mind? Well, like all good leaders, he makes a list of things that he could spend his money on. So, if he's got that list, problem solved, right? Well, I'm afraid it's not as easy as that. For starters, how do we know that the king's list is full and accurate? I mean, in this particular scenario that we've set up, the leader's actually considering a specific risk when in reality, we all know that leaders are bombarded with countless departments and the concerns and demands and requests that were all required yesterday. This is why we actually have risk forums to give the leaders a chance to actually think and talk about risk. Now, in this situation, realistically, would the king even know about the dragon risk or have the time to even think about it properly? Well, possibly not. We know he's not aware of the effectiveness of his current controls and other controls you might want to consider. If there's no sharing or transparency, we're leaving the king with a gap in his knowledge. And he can't make effective decisions about risk, effective decisions about anything. And this is where the Risk and Control Office come in. I firmly believe that there's a role within the Risk Office to help an organization see its real risk landscape. Dragons, holes in shields, sleepy guards, and everything else. That is going to help leaders understand risks properly, evaluate controls honestly, and prioritize what matters to them to allow them to make informed decisions about where to invest. Analyzing risk and controls and communicating them to a mixed leadership audience, or at any level for that matter, is highly challenging. And the aim isn't to scare anyone or to stop the kingdom from taking certain actions. The risk management professionals are often tagged as blockers to progression. But I believe if it's done in the right way, that's not the case at all, if we can communicate it clearly. What we do is we help organizations know what's out there and that we're prepared for it. In this example, the king should be able to make decisions about what he wants to move forward. A risk management lens should not be a kind of traffic warden style, things are bad and we mustn't do X. Although that particular point, I think, splits the risk professional community down the middle. And I think I sit within the philosophy of empowering the leader to make decisions and have a risk appetite. Others would maybe disagree with me. For me, it's about translating often complex, ambiguous, highly technical, detailed problem statements that are often loaded with agenda and bias and getting that clear view for the boss. That's the art of the deal. And this is where the risk office would need everybody's help. So information on existing or emerging risks, known issues about control gaps or weaknesses, things like that. We rely on Intel to bring it all together. And my ask from the session in telling you the story is to please keep a lookout. And if you see something or you have concerns, please reach out to my team. And so we can help paint that full picture for the leadership so they can make those decisions. Now, back to reality and away from the session that I was delivering there and back to the presentation today. Firstly, I'd like to call out that I ran this session by my wife. And towards the end of it, she actually said, hang on, are you suggesting that you're some sort of knight in shining armor? And I got to be honest, I was so deep into the analogy, I'd completely missed the inference. And so what I had to do was I added an extra bit into the presentation, and I put up this slide, and as a sort of disclaimer, as a sort of nervous, out of shape looking knight, to try and say that that wasn't my intent and that I apologize. But I can see how some people might have been looking at that and thinking, who does this guy think he is? And yes, as you've seen through the presentation, I did use AI to generate cartoon versions of myself and the scenario. It did take a lot of prompting to get exactly what I wanted. However, the storytelling element that was what really resonated with the group. So I believe that they came to the session expecting to be quickly disengaged. Some of you may have even done that today, to be honest. The fact is, in that particular example, I had many and multiple follow-up conversations and introductions to new individuals and parts of departments that I hadn't previously spoken to before. So really cracked the back out of trying to speak to different people and get different perspectives and gathering that intel. The door was opened as a result of me presenting uh, these concepts in this way. So to bring this back to the presentation theme, uh, bridging the gap between technology security and the business, and how it's not easily done. My example of what I just gave you there was sharing a simple set of concepts. More often than not, it's not particularly simple within technology and security risk. Even the problem statement that I put at the start, that would have taken multiple conversations just to get to that level of finished, polished statement. It genuinely is a constant challenge, and that's probably why that was driving it, having these type of sessions to share with the community as well. Now, during a major incident, or a major IT or security disruption, a good major incident team will be able to bring the right people together and separate the noise and agenda and bias. And what they do is they distill it down into a clean, meaningful, accessible statement and set of steps. It's what they do, but their skill is to do this at the heightened pace of a crisis. And usually something profoundly bad has happened and everybody has either stopped or is interested. Now, when you think about technology risk and security, uncovering issues in technology control gaps that haven't actually manifested into a sort of meaningful negative outcome for the business yet. And doing it in peacetime whilst people are distracted and have other priorities is an entirely different kettle of fish. So there is a role for the risk office to sit within that gap in peacetime to help translate that detail so anyone can understand what the problem is, what the impact has been or could be, what has caused it, and also what the business want to do about it. I hope today's sort of brief example has provoked the question to you about what other approaches you could take with your own organization to land that cross-department message, however technical. And I wanted to, as I say, give you this sort of 15, 20-minute pitch to show that even something as ridiculous as a castle and a king and a dragon and sleepy guards can really resonate with a business. It's different. And I encourage you to consider the storytelling element, the use of AI for interesting cartoon characters. It's all there. And I hope that you can take something away from this to sort of inspire you to do the same in your own organizations. So with that, I finished my pitch just yet there. I'd like to thank you for all of your time today and for those that follow up and watch us on YouTube in the future. So hello to future people. And I welcome any follow-on questions or discussion from Charlie off the back of that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Luke. That was excellent. I was looking at the slides, actually going, I wonder what you used prompt-wise and how long the prompts ended up having to be to get them. But yeah, that was really good. One question for me first. Have you ever got the problem statements or the messaging wrong.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh, so many times. That's the art of failure is success, in my opinion, right? Okay, so the ones that always stick in my head, um, I would say there was an organization I worked in where I was trying to, it wasn't necessarily a technology problem. It was a, it was an observation that had a cost implication to it. And but it was focused within business continuity space, essentially, much like in a lot of business continuity environments, and I'm sure a lot of business continuity managers will nod their head in agreement with this. Sometimes the organization disengages, especially in the absence of a major event, and plans get mothballed or misunderstood. And in major organizations, if you misunderstand the configuration of your plans, you can actually accidentally spend an awful lot of money in terms of remote capability, alternative offices, access to kit and people. And in one organization, I within my particular area, I was able to identify that essentially we'd massively overcooked our business continuity arrangements because we'd been regulated to within such a point that everyone just put everything in and budgeted for everything. And I wanted to try and demonstrate that to the CIO to say you do not necessarily need 6,000 developers globally within 4 hours to be up and running. And you're actually spending well over $1 million a year to do this.
Yeah.
And the problem is in delivering the message, the first time around, hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I packaged up a presentation. I was very excited, being slightly more junior in my career, because I'd found a massive area that I could definitely improve, and it just did not land whatsoever. And I just got ignored. And I went around for feedback with some of my peers and mentors and the departments, and they said, "You're missing the point." It says everything has to have a dollar cost to the commercial angle of it if you want to capture the imagination of the point you're trying to make. I said that will definitely trigger someone's interest. And so then I did activity-based costing stats. I did budget costs on the building, and I come back with an almost the same problem, but with an accountancy lens as well, to show the aggregated spend over the last 10 years on an approach and how much they could potentially save. And it was radically changed within 6 months, full buy-in from the senior global MDs and all of their main lieutenants. And that was the first time around. It absolutely did not land at all, and I was a bit bemused by it because I was so excited. And similarly, I in a previous life, I found a rather sizable set of gaps within a vendor for an organization I was working for. One of the first times I'd done it by myself, and I was very excited about catching this out. And I thought I'd, employee of the month level quality. I was very excited, and so I packaged it all together. As you can tell, I quite enjoy storytelling, and I quite enjoy presenting it. So I got this really shiny pack out, so many key core points that are just as valid today. And it just went dead, and it did not get picked up whatsoever. And I just couldn't understand. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll use the dollar cost thing again. And it didn't land either. And
Right.
I thought, what on earth am I missing here? Because it just kept going on, working its way back to the bottom of the in tray. And strategically, something I'd missed because I hadn't got any leadership exposure at that point, is strategically we'd already communicated to shareholders that we'd made a technology innovation roadmap, and we'd committed to certain things. And the issues that would have been addressed may have disrupted the communication of that, and we needed to manage it in a discreet way. And I missed the whole political, strategic, part of it that needed to be positioned and packaged rather than me just ringing a bell and screaming that something was wrong.
So understanding that broader picture
Yes,
is a key element as well, and then targeted messaging.
absolutely.
Find the triggers that are going to make people want to act.
Yeah, but those two are the two that stick out for me the most. I mean, there are many others, but some things just don't land. I was at a conference once where I tried to. There was quite a lot of presentations on the standard approaches to the profession that I was in at the time, and there was several hundred people in London going to the sessions. And there was two sessions on at the same time, a session that I was doing and a session that an individual who'd been in the industry for years had been in. And it was telling something that everybody did as core practice within their job. And I was excited to present a hybrid cloud resilience and backup and data recovery. And in his session, he had standing room only, 200 people. I had 14 people. So my packaging was completely wrong there as well. So it's many failed and some unuseful successful attempts as well. But to your point, Charlie, the broadening of your understanding, having a front to back understanding of the business. A mentor of mine very early on in my career said to me, "You're never really going to break your mold until you understand how the business makes money. As a risk professional, particularly, you seldom make a dollar for the organization directly. And he says, if having never made a dollar in your life, you need to break the back out of thinking commercially and strategically. And that's pretty much where I've targeted my career in the philosophy I've taken, having worked in trade desks and tech stacks for investment banking as well. It's real commercial gains and commercial interest. You have to take, you cannot just be what they would call the no squad. You have to take balanced views on everything and fully consider risk appetite.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience as well. So for immature new organizations just starting their journey, what are one or two simple steps they can take to better align security with their business?
That's a really good question. I think it's really interesting because I was at a conference recently where there was startups, some new organizations with limited resource to do this kind of thing. And there was also an individual that worked for a large organization of a mature, large, well-regulated organization of 5,000 employees. And there was a session that they delivered on a particular risk domain of which they're an expert in. And you just cannot achieve the same level of maturity and content that you got in an organization that isn't ready or mature to take it. And you essentially create a bit of an administrative monster. So if there's absolutely nothing on the table, usually there's something legacy like a risk register that's not worth the paper it's written by somebody that retired 10 years ago. If it's genuinely at the ground floor, I think the risk professional has to be quite enterprising, and they have to get out and introduce themselves and their profession and what they do to the community as much as possible, market themselves first of all. Then they need to create relationships with specific control domains, and they need to have trusting relationships with those so that you can collaborate with them to essentially I might be contentious here in the way I say this, but essentially get them to confess their sins. Now, I'm not one for apportioning blame, and my philosophy is very much let's work together. I don't care really who was on the hook for what happened. Let's just all hold hands and let's talk about what the problem is, and let's see if we can fix it. And for me, self-identified issues are so important. You can have your control testing, you can have your audits, but frankly, if this is where I probably lean back into more of a rigid risk professional. If you are a control owner and are responsible for protecting the organization in any way, being responsible for a particular tool or service, you need to be fully aware of where the control gaps are, where you're not investing as much, where something isn't performed or designed as appropriately as it could be. And I feel you give the opportunity to the individual to work with them to tease out those concerns, the things that make them stay awake at night and those sorts of things. And then if they don't, really the reality is if they don't know, then there's a real genuine question over competency there. If they do know and they're not telling you, there's a question over integrity there. Sometimes there's a between the gaps, but they're the two fundamental camps if the people aren't coming to you. So from an immature organization, the real value to get started from a technology and risk estate at least is to get yourself out there as a known resource and a subject matter expert, be able to develop good relationships with key control domain areas, and you have to get their trust to show them, and this can take several months and even longer, to get them to self-identify the issues. There is credit to be given in positive risk behaviors. And what you will end up with that is you will have a long list of issues, but then you'll be able to do themes and trends. There may be issues that can come together. And there may be multiple issues that affect one control, and that will allow you to focus your problem and give you a rationale to approach that. There's there's many there's many benefits that come from taking that approach, in my opinion, rather than trying to hit the organization with a framework and burning out 25 policies that no one reads or abides to.
No, that makes sense. Excellent. We've got a couple of minutes for last question. What's the biggest barrier you see when trying to align security priorities with wider business goals, and how can organizations start to overcome it?
Well, this is great because this is a like a real life question. Like, I mean, it's happened all the way through the years. I have this memory from years ago where I was gathering uh, business impact analysis data from different departments within an organization, and on it they've got their recovery time objectives, and then you then spend time with technology and the disaster recovery capability, and they have their times and they have their times, and never the two shall meet. The business say they need X, the IT department laugh and say that's ridiculous. I'd never be able to get that up in time. So there's the expectations between the two has always been the case. I actually think now it's since we've sort of merged over the years from the sort of waterfall project space and into more of an agile capacity, it's been really, really challenging to keep a hold of meaningful risk conversations and giving that visibility to the top about problems. I feel that a lot of the times, I'll be honest, a lot of the times the horse has bolted, and I've had to retrospectively go back and track the collateral damage in the tailwind, and
Right.
it's there is that. And then more interestingly, the reason why I was smiling when you asked is because AI usage and AI builds and development are fascinating me at the moment because the channel shift of particularly technologists, but also business users that are choosing to leverage the services. What's blocked, what's not blocked. There was an interesting one that I came across recently, which was a AI voice recorder that people felt that they could. It's a mobile one that you can take around rather than baked into your laptop for
Yeah.
transcripts on Copilot. And there's a hell of a lot of ethical considerations there with being people's consent, as well as the security implications of how the data is being held. But to answer your question, I've been actually in a working group previously where we've overcooked it and we've tried to overlay a massive framework to the business, and the business find a way to deliver what they're delivering anyway. So you have to try and balance what is the right thing to block and what is the right thing to collaborate on. Well, where are your red lines? If it's a crucial piece of PII data, your golden, like, your golden sort of crown jewels, then you need to, yeah, you need to make sure that you have some red lines on there for party red lines where you wouldn't cross. But I encourage a sort of almost like a consultative clinic style approach when it comes to like, oh, we are now going to bake this AI service that we've put into development well, this application that leverages an AI service in development that we're now going to lift into production. Or we need you to nod on this yesterday. You need to probably prepare for those conversations by having those red lines about what is the absolute bare minimum for your role that you must be protecting. And that's a real challenge to do. And it's very reminiscent of the sort of the move from waterfall to agile in terms of AI services are being baked into systems that we already used and we didn't know now have that capability, let alone ones that we're using to help with our system development. It's everybody is in catch up at the moment in that space.
Right. Yeah, and we're seeing that day in, day out from a range of clients.
Mm-hmm.
That's brilliant. Luke, listen, thank you so much for the talk today and for taking the time out. And thanks to everybody who took time out and joined us today. So the next of our Talking Cyber webinar series takes place on Tuesday next week. That's Tuesday the 23rd. And our guest speaker is Jude McCrory, CEO of Cyber and Fraud Centre Scotland. Jude's talk is titled The Year of Wicked Messes and What's to Come. So you probably don't want to miss that. Hopefully see you there and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again, Luke.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me.
Cheers, man.